Well, hello, y'all. This is Mainstream Current, and I'm Drew Hoagland. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about my journey from the left to center right. That's something that's come up in my life quite a bit, especially in the last couple years, when the journey really kicked off. But as I've alluded to in some of my past videos, my ideology and my political beliefs have definitely changed over the years. And as I've said before, I think that that's only expected when you have a person that's developing and growing long beyond becoming an adult. Throughout our entire lives, we should be growing and developing. So I was never that political growing up. And if I was, it definitely would have been more far right. And so that was based on my family, based on the area that I grew up. And then when I got into college, I mean, obviously, as you get into college, as you get into adult life, your views start to change when you're not underneath your parents' tutelage anymore. So obviously that's going to happen. I did go to a religious school, so that will have further pushed me in eventually branching out, honestly. It was during those years that I started to see some fallacies and some hypocrisies that were there, and that became really apparent. So rather than push me further right, I think it was then that I started getting pushed to the left, because things that I'd been told my whole life didn't actually match up to what reality had said. And I'm trying to think of specific examples, but some of them are they're the classic ones that people grew up in the 90s hearing. That, even like masturbating. Like, if you masturbate too much, you're going to go blind. Certain things like that. You hear them as a kid and you don't necessarily believe them, but you don't necessarily have the evidence not to believe them, so you are stuck there. So when I was getting into college, and getting out of college rather, that's when I really started to branch out and be like, okay, well, if this wasn't true, is this true? And if this isn't true, is this true? So it was a great awakening time for me, but it was during my travels in my 20s when I was all over the US, all over the world. And I got to meet a lot of different people. I got to meet people of different backgrounds, of different nationalities, of different religions, of different sexualities, everything. I mean, I traveled not the entire globe, but I traveled the world, and a lot of the US, most of the US. I guess it was in that time that I started to get the allure of the Democratic side or the left side more, because, well, they're for the people. And I had been meeting these people, and they were so much different than how I was raised and how I grew up. And then I started to realize, like, maybe it doesn't matter. Like, maybe there's more to it than just all of this religious sense that I was raised with, like God. I'm trying to articulate myself, because this is really the first time that I'm actually delving into what brought me full circle from far right to pretty far left to now center right. And until things change, that's where I'm at now. And so you hear Democrat, for the people, you think like, okay, for people that are immigrants, Democrats better. For people that are anti-war, Democrats are better. For people that want to allow people to love other adults, that's the Democrat. But then I started to realize that's not at all true. But it took me a while to get there. So it was in my 20s when I was meeting all these different people, working as a whitewater rafting guide, lifeguard, server. It seemed to be the more mature thing to do was to be Democrat, where it's like there was a certain virtue to it. Like, oh, I'm I'm almost better than you because I'm Democrat, not Republican. And I definitely got sucked up into that. Things really kicked off in 2016. BLM was on the rise. It was nowhere near where it got to be in 2020 and 2021, but it was on the rise. And at this point, there were so many shootings and so many different things that I can't even pinpoint exactly. I think it was in Frederick, Missouri. Anyway, I'm not here to talk about the individual shootings, but I remember when I was in Tennessee, there was a protest going on down in Louisiana. I believe it was Louisiana. And my friend and I, we were committed to go. And we even had a conversation at one point, if this continues for another week, we're going to go down there. And I was in Eastern Tennessee, so it was close enough that making the journey wouldn't have been so bad. But then those protests kind of dissolved, and the end of the summer came, and I worked at a Old Smoky moonshine distillery down in Gatlinburg for a couple of weeks until I worked in Arkansas at the Bikes, Blues, and Barbecues, Harley-Davidson rally. And then after that, I did go down to Louisiana. I did get to see New Orleans with a couple friends and met some other friends. I got the initial tattoo. It's supposed to be a fleur-de-lis. It was done by a friend. I always meant to get it touched up so it would look more like a fleur-de-lis, but then he passed away. So instead, I got the fleur-de-lis done in stick and poke style to match with the state of Maine, which I eventually put around it. That was done in stick and poke style as well. And the symbology there is that I'm an Eagle Scout and I'm from Maine, but the fleur-de-lis is also the saint symbol. So it was a crossover between me being an Eagle Scout and also me getting it down in New Orleans. And then I put the state of Maine around it because that's kind of encapsulates my heart will always be here in Maine. Even if I'm not here, it'll always be in Maine. So then after that, I went back and I was living in Vegas, and I drove cross country this whole time, Tennessee, Arkansas, traveled with a friend down to Louisiana, New Orleans, and then traveled back to my truck. And then I got in my truck and I went to Las Vegas, where I was living during the winter seasons, and during the summer seasons, I would be in Tennessee. So when I got back to Vegas, I was trying to find a job, and that's when things were really kicking off at Standing Rock in North Dakota. And I was trying to find a job, and I was having no real luck. Things that I was interested in, I didn't give it a whole lot of time, maybe 2 weeks, but that whole 2-week period, I just kept feeling a certain magnetism, literally a draw to North Dakota. I have never felt anything like that before or since, and I talked to a lot of people that were in North Dakota that all felt very similarly to me. The story's not about North Dakota, but North Dakota heavily influenced this. I can do another video on my time at Standing Rock. Crazy. Lots of stories, hardships, good times, bad times, all of it. Learning lessons throughout the entire thing. So during my time at Standing Rock, that's when my ideology definitely started to shift. I was already more center-left, but that's when I went left. And I was fully convinced that Trump was evil, that he was a misogynist, racist, homophobe, that he was going to instill tyranny and destroy democracy, and, all those things, a lot of them that still persist. Except back then I had an excuse because I was basing things on speculation. We had no concrete evidence as to what Trump would do as president like we do now. So for me to persist in that kind of understanding that he's a racist, misogynistic, homophobe, yada, 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 after all the concrete evidence and 4 years of having him as president, it would be asinine for me to still hold to those. Yet some people do. And it took me a while. I mean, when he first became president and was going to get inaugurated, friends and I from Standing Rock drove to DC, all the way to DC. And during that time, we joined an affinity group of people that were trying to occupy the inauguration. We didn't try, we definitely did. We didn't fully succeed, but Standing Rock and our affinity group succeeded more than most. So there was 12 other groups and there was 13 gates. So when we got there, we were expecting to join another affinity group, Black Lives Matters, Radical Feminists, and then there was others. We were expecting to join another affinity group and just throw our support behind them. But there were so many of us that the organizers wanted us to have our own affinity group. All these other affinity groups had months and months to plan. We had days to plan. We got there, January 20th was when the inauguration was in 2017. So we got there maybe the 15th and we left maybe the 25th. Maybe it was the 13th or the 23rd, some time frame in there. Definitely was there for inauguration and for Occupy, for the Million Women's March. So we got there and we had to prep this affinity group. We had to come up with ways to block the gate to prevent people from outside the security gates to get inside to the security gates where the inauguration was actually happening. And like I said, I can get into that another time. That is to say that I was so far against Trump becoming our president that I strapped myself to other people and then strapped ourselves in front of and stood ourselves in front of a security gate while there's onlookers, people that are trying to get through, security officers, camera crews. Most of us were dressed for the winter in North Dakota, but in January in DC, it was really warm. So we were all wearing like winter clothes and sweating our asses off and did a damn good job of preventing people from getting through. I even got pulled away from the group at one point thinking I was going to get arrested, but then I threw myself back into the fray and eventually left DC. There was the Millions Women's March, and that was the most people I've ever been around. And it was so overwhelming. There was so many emotions, so many people. The air was tense because Trump was officially our president now, but there was a million women. Maybe there was actually a million women. I know that there was not just women. There was many, many, many people of both sides, but I'm sure that there was a ton of women. The subway systems got flooded. They couldn't even operate. So you had to be walking through DC. There was no subway systems, no taxis. Like, people were everywhere, just spread out. If you had to go to the bathroom, you had to find a urinal and then wait in line. And there was only so many and they were all spread out and it was bad. So then going back to North Dakota, and after North Dakota, I got arrested in North Dakota, and then I ended up leaving a couple days after I got arrested to go to Oregon, where I eventually made my way back to Vegas. And then at that point in March, it was actually April, I got back to Vegas April 1st because that was my birthday. And so then eventually I flew back to Maine, and that's what brought me back to Maine. And it was a long time into living back here in Maine that I still had that far left mentality. A lot of it was residue where so much emotion had been packed into these facts that they were now feelings and they weren't fully articulated logical points. And so it took me a while, and some of it hasn't changed. Some of it, I learned so much from that time frame that will stick with me forever for good. But then there was a lot where there's mob mentality. You get caught up in a mob and you don't really think for yourself. It's almost impossible to think for yourself because you're just so caught up in the energy around you that you're not an individual anymore. You're like a crowd. And if somebody next to you starts doing something and people behind them start doing it, like you're so much more likely to do that. So I think a lot of my time on the left was because of mob mentality and feelings over facts and speculation over trying to come up with another S, but speculation over what actually would occur. And so I'm thankful for that time because I see a lot of people that did not agree with me on points that I had back then that are now swapping. Like we've almost swapped places. But to me, that doesn't make sense because for me, it makes sense that I would go from having speculation and emotions and no real data to go by, be given presented data, to be given other points of view, to be given time and to see facts and to switch, opposed to people that were for Trump in the past that are now against him, and they're against him for different reasons than they're now against him for the same reasons that they were for him before. Like, it doesn't make sense. It feels like we're living in an alternate world. And I vowed to myself in 2016 that I would never vote for Trump. So I didn't vote for Trump in 2016, and I followed up on that in 2020. I remember 2020 was a time where I was really confused. I mean, obviously, the entire world was confused in 2020. The entire world. Specifically, what I meant there is that I was starting to come around to Trump because there had been 4 years of him being president, and the economy was good. He kept us out of war. Troops and veterans were taken care of. Gay marriage was not abolished. So many things that I care about were better under Trump. And I saw that. But because I had vowed never to vote for him, I did not vote for Trump in 2020. And I voted third party. Glad the third party did not win. I was still very naive. Still naive. But at this point, I'm going to break my promise to not vote for Trump again because I do feel like people like myself were the reason that Trump didn't get into office last time. And I'm not going to repeat that mistake. At this point, they have thrown so many allegations against Trump. They've done so much to besmirch him and to dig into his past that if they were going to find anything conclusive, they would have done it already. And all these other things that they're throwing at him, it's just shit they're throwing on the wall and seeing what'll stick. And if they haven't found it yet, they're not going to find anything, because there's nothing to be found. So unless something drastically changes with Trump and how he presents himself from here on out, then I am definitely voting for Trump in November. And not because I'm a hardcore Republican, because I'm not. Both the Republican side and the Democratic side probably would not want me. I am not a party person. As I've said before, I am people and policy over party lines. So I may have some more conservative thoughts, but I might vote more liberal. And I might have some more liberal thoughts, and I might vote more conservative. Because it's not always about me, and it's not always about here and now. Sometimes you have to be thinking the good of all and the future. What is this going to do for the future? How are they going to have to grapple with this, both good and bad? And I try not to get caught up in the moment, in emotions, and for party like I used to. And that's what's led me more center-right. I want to be in the center. I want to be able to see both sides and have value in both sides. However, one side really does seem to have gone over the deep end. Not that both sides don't have extremes, because there are far right extremists, and there are definitely far left extremists. But unfortunately, it seems like the left can't really differentiate between the far left and normal left, as well as like the far right and normal right. They don't really blend as much. There's distinctions, you can tell the difference. But with far left and left, you have some people that you know as politicians have always been more left. And they are not speaking out against the people that are far left. So the far left seems to be running the Democratic side. They are no longer for the people. They're no longer anti-war. They are all about open borders, not legal immigration. Like they are here to try and get more people to flood the country so that they can get the votes, because they're realizing that their policies are awful. I mean, take Harris, for example. What are her policies? Other than the things that Trump has said, and then that she's claimed as her own, what does she stand for? Is she really going to be better for female rights? Because I don't have that kind of faith. And it's not a big deal to me as a gay male, but if it's a big deal to you, you should look into it. And to be honest, I don't think that Harris is going to be better on female reproductive health. And if she is, it's in a superficial way where she breaks the Constitution to do so. Because federally, you cannot have a federal ban on abortion. It is not legal based on the Constitution. State by state, let each state decide. And if you don't like it in your state, move to a different state. Or get people in your state to rally behind you with logic and facts and get them to vote in the way that you want. But there are other states you can move to. So if you don't like the way things are going, California, then you can move. But the problem is if you're going to seek something better, don't bring your old baggage with you. California, you're coming here to Maine, and you're going all over, anywhere outside of California. And that should tell you something. Those laws that Gavin Newsom is enacting, those are not good. They are objectively awful. So when you move to another state and come November, keep that in mind and do not bring those dirty ideologies out of states that are doing badly. A state like California should not be in the terrible state that it is. I mean, you have drugs and crime and all kinds of horrendous acts happening. So all of these things kind of helped push me more center-right, because I'm all for immigration, but it's got to be legal. And I'm all for taking care of veterans, taking care of soldiers. I'm all for staying out of war. And the conservative side, the more Republican right-leaning side, those are where those values fall. And so it's been a journey, and this may not be where I end. And I just kind of wanted to share, because this comes up a lot, especially if you're somebody from my past that knew me back then, that maybe is only now figuring out I have a YouTube channel. You might be really confused as to how I got here, because I was staunchly against Trump. But again, I'll reiterate that that was based on speculation and emotions. And now that we have facts, I can look back and see how things were and take my feelings and match them with facts. And if they don't match up, then I'm sorry, facts win. And so honestly, it's taking a lot for me to make this video, because I was so staunchly against Trump and I was so staunchly left-leaning that it's almost embarrassing to admit how far I've come. But at the same time, that's growth and development, and we as humans should all be having that, regardless of age. And so, again, it's a common question that I get when talking to people, like, how did I go from there to here, and how can I be a gay man that votes Republican? I guess we have a title, we're log cabin Republicans, if you're gay but you vote right. So I guess that's what I am. I'm a log cabin Republican, and to be honest, I don't hate that name. It sounds pretty butch, and that's up my alley. So this is just a little bit more about myself and where I'm coming from. And so now when you watch my videos about news and whatnot, you can understand where I'm coming from. And regardless of whether you agree with me, you can understand where I'm coming from. I love the questions. I get a lot of questions in person that could have been left as comments. Not that I don't want the questions in person, but I do like the engagement. So if you're one of my viewers that watches frequently but doesn't comment, I'm looking at you. Go ahead and comment, please. But seriously, if you have any questions, if you have any insight, any similar stories, maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you went from right to left. I want to know that. I want to know why. And so go ahead and drop a comment down below, because I like getting involved with my viewers. The engagement, I'm not going to lie, helps my channel, but I also like to know who I'm talking to. And the more feedback I get, the more I feel like I'm actually talking to a friend in the car or at the bar. So if you like this content, then I hope that I've earned your subscription. So go ahead and do all those fun things, like, subscribe, comment. But if you already do those things, or if you don't do any of those things, just I'd love for you to share this video and just help get some more engagement out there. Well, until next time, y'all, it's been Drew Hoagland on Mainstream Current.